Okay. Hi. So welcome to the Women Business Pavilion. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me well. Yes, very good. So it's a pleasure to be, that I can hear myself as well. Pleasure to be with you today. Maybe there is a bit of echo. And this is a very important event because last year, remember, we were in the Women Business Coalition calling for an ambitious outcome in Dubai and for the inclusion of language around the transition away from fossil fuels or fossil fuel phase out. And I have to say that I was in a meeting this week with many of the heads of states, the IEA, and the government of Azerbaijan, and I was quite impressed that we heard many countries talking about the three things that we need to do: triple renewables, double energy efficiency, and transition away from fossil fuels. And I'm very impressed on how fast this new narrative and mandate has been included. But here today, we're going to talk about NDCs. And I don't need to tell you what NDCs are, right? And we have the privilege to have here with us Jennifer Morgan and Bruna from Brazil to talk about both what Germany and Brazil are going to do in this COP and regarding the next round of NDCs. It's very important that the business community keeps the pressure on governments that we need to see mitigation outcomes coming from this COP. We know that there is a lot of noise, but the business reality and the market is showing that the transition is inevitable. Clean technologies are much more competitive than they were before, and more competitive to some of the fossil fuel alternatives, and it makes a lot of business sense to go into that direction. So we want, as countries are developing and presenting their headlines and their plans behind the NDCs, we want those NDCs to be investable by business and to include the three main things that we need to do here: triple renewables, double energy efficiency, increase storage, and have a clear plan to transition away from fossil fuels. We have done a report that provides that business take on NDCs. We want companies to engage with governments as they are developing their NDCs, and I'm going to invite Andrew to present the findings of the report that we have done with business. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Maria. Welcome to everybody. I'll be very brief. We want to hear from our panel and from our excellent policy speakers, and not from me, but we thought you can't have a whole event with no slides at all. So just three slides here to talk about what we call our call to action from businesses for ambitious and investable NDCs. So we launched this just before Climate Week in New York in September, and we've been really pushing the business community to speak up on this and get the voices heard about why business wants to see ambitious and investable NDCs. Why did we do this quickly? Well, firstly, recognizing that while we're all aware there's this big ambition gap in how the NDCs stand now and what we need to see from the new NDCs coming, there's also a big investment gap in terms of what the IEA is showing us, what the rate of growth of clean energy investment we need to see. So we need these NDCs to be both ambitious and investable from a private sector if we're going to see this transition happen at the pace that we need it to happen. But then that begs the question, well, what does that mean to be investable from a business perspective? So we wanted to put out a case from the point of view of the businesses we work with. What does that look like to be investable? We also wanted to use this to actually get businesses engaged themselves, because what we found talking to our business community earlier in the year was that many are not really interested at that point in the NDC process. They didn't understand what the value is for them in engaging with this UN process. It's not the actual policies on the ground which drive their investment decisions and operation decisions. So we wanted to use this to really make them understand that, mobilize them, motivate them to speak up, and then make sure those voices get heard. And then, as Maria said, we also wanted to just build on this momentum we had going out of COP28, both ourselves from this Fossil to Clean campaign, which this event is organized as part of, and also an important piece we did last year called the Corporate Climate Stocktake. That was in parallel with the global stocktake and was designed to ask businesses what do they see as the policy barriers that they want to remove in order to accelerate their action. So we integrated that into this work. just to show you what is in this call to action, it's divided into 3 pillars. And what we really wanted to get across here is that the NDC itself is very important, but from a business perspective, it's going to be investable. We have to think through the NDC and really see the follow-up into the clear and consistent policy frameworks that will actually deliver the regulations, the incentives, the tax credits, and so on that will actually drive the business investment. And then we need to see also a clear and transparent process by which businesses is engaged from the outset in helping governments to create these, not only the NDC, but also the policy framework to make sure that these are really investable. So each of these pillars then has kind of 3 areas we looked into. In terms of the overall NDC itself, firstly, of course, it's about setting a strong economy-wide target to really set the signal to businesses that this is the direction of travel. Secondly, it's important to make sure that in the NDC there are these more specific sectoral targets that show businesses, that show the economy where the government wants to take these sectors, and that will be even clearer on this direction of travel. And then thirdly, that there's a clear commitment in the NDC that this is going to become policy, and that it's not just a piece of paper that will be floated around in the UN process. Then, as I said, we wanted to be very clear that from a business point of view, we would have to see the follow through into policies for implementation. And here we divided the policy framework into 3 levels. So firstly, the national strategy, being very clear that this has to come from the highest level of government, to be coordinated across ministries, and have a very clear strategy that shows everyone how serious this direction of travel is. Secondly, that we need specific sectoral policies to really drive the deployment and the innovation in the actual sectors that we need to see acceleration in to get this transition. And then thirdly, that we need to see commitment to the necessary international coordination on policies, in particular for the so-called hard-to-abate sectors, the heavy industries, where no one country can really drive this alone. We need more collaboration across policy. And then on the third pillar of the process around business dialogue and other stakeholders with government, we show that it's important to have consultation not only on the NDC process itself, but also in this kind of co-creation of solutions where businesses have the shared interest with government to find a way to meet both the national target and the company's own very strict, in some cases, target. And then lastly, the importance of communicating this in a positive way to the wider public. So that's how we frame this call to action across these 3 pillars. What we've been doing is really getting businesses to speak up on this, and we continue to do that. So our next steps is firstly, right here at COP, looking ahead to the G20 next week, into Davos next year, really consistently getting the businesses that see that this is in their strategic interest to speak up and make the case for why they want to see these ambitious and investable NDCs. And then we're going much more country specific. So want to make sure we have country focus notes that take these kind of general terms of call to action and make them relevant to each country context, so that businesses in those countries can really speak up to those policies. And we've been working on one for Brazil with our partners at Ceres. We've been working on one now for the EU in line with the new EU institutions. We're looking at working with India and South Africa, and really to make sure that this gets more country specific. So that's all I wanted to say to summarize our call to action. And hand back to Maria to introduce the speakers, please.
So it's my great pleasure to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer is like one of us, sorry, but much more important than us, because she has been working in the past with WRI, in Greenpeace, and now you have this incredible job, and you're such a force, no, in driving what is needed and putting more coherence into the system. So please, we want to hear from you. Thank you for making the time to come. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for Women Leading on Climate as well, if I may put a pitch out on that one. Maria, it's so important to have business voices here, thinking strategically, connecting the dots, because I think in a way when I hear about your report and read it, it resonates a lot, because what I've been finding is that we are at this incredibly important moment that we all know, right? We know from the science how important it is at this COP, and I'll say something about that at the end, because I can't be at a COP and not talk about what we need to do here in the next 10 days. But also, we know that the national climate plans for 2035 are absolutely essential in order to avoid greater climate chaos and to drive a prosperous economy. I think we are at a moment where it is unstoppable moving forward with renewable energy with a circular economy, which is moving forward, certainly for the European Union. Just last week, our leaders made clear that being the first climate neutral continent is about our competitiveness and our economic. So, but what does this mean on the NDC side? I've actually kind of been trying not to even use that acronym. Because I think what I find is these different worlds that we live in. And that these national climate plans, well, they're not only UNFCCC communication documents, but as has been said here, they're really the tip of a larger economic planning and transformation process. And I want to actually recognize the 3 countries that have put forward their national climate plans here during the COP, the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, and of course Brazil. We'll hear from Brazil. These were, from my understanding, very intensive national discussions, and that's what's so important. And it's clear that these NDCs, well, they're only going to be implemented. The transformation will only occur if it aligns with low carbon business interests and opportunities and business interests. So it needs to be about the economic prosperity proposition, as we have seen with the EU Green Deal and the Net Zero Industry Act. I've been speaking when we were together in New York. I was in Washington at the bank and travel quite extensively. And I've been talking a lot to business, to finance actors, change makers in the field. And what I've really found is that they're very clear. Many of you probably in the audience are from business, but I wanted to share what I've heard. Number one, they want to know where our national roads are going, short and long term. They need to prepare their own business strategies and climate plans accordingly. They want to know about clear policy frameworks, about government investments in things like skills, which is something that we need much more attention to and is part of a COP here and Belém, I'm sure, as well, but also in infrastructure and, if necessary, financial incentives. They want to know if governments are confident enough to include the key sectors. Sometimes you only see some sectors come in. No, we need actually all the sectors to be coming in. And they want to know our plans and our milestones for key sectors for being able to identify future growth markets and business opportunities, because it also is not only a domestic plan, but it also prepares us the international side of things as well. What are the business opportunities across the world? I know German companies look at NDCs from other countries and say, okay, where can we go? These conversations are key to understand the needs, therefore, and to connect these dots. Therefore, German ambassadors and embassies around the world, they are going to be organizing national climate plan dialogues and convenings with the private sector, with companies, chambers of commerce in our guest countries, and be very country specific. And that was a point that I saw on the last slide that I just really want to highlight, because I think getting country specific, we know how different each country is, and we know how important a political economy is in each of those countries. So very, very important. And I'm glad that we're also cooperating with We Mean Business on this. So that's fantastic. You know, you are the transformation business and finance. And I want to encourage you to continue to be clear with us as governments. You need long, loud legal signals. You need clarity. If you're going to triple renewable energy, you need a solid renewable energy policy in place. You need to see the guarantees that are going to bring down the cost of capital. And I think we also need, at the same time, to see credible ambition from the business sector. I think businesses should lead with ambitious climate commitments as essential part of your business strategy, with one, especially through science-based targets. So show the way forward, show the models of reporting and accountability, calculate in the risks and costs of inaction into your business strategies. In 10 years from now, what are the hazards going to be from climate change, from biodiversity loss? Natural resource shortages they're already at the World Economic Forum at the top of the 4 global risks. So also invest in transformation and resilience in green technologies. And we need to be making this transformation happen all around the world, not only of course, in developed countries. Only 10% of investments are reaching developing countries right now besides China. So I think this is where government and private sector come together, the need for public-private collaboration, innovative instruments for blended finance and de-risking. I mentioned guarantees. Germany has started a green guarantee group to work together to utilize guarantees much more often and and to bring down those costs of capital. And I think obviously the financial institutions play a critical role here. Finally, I mean, at this COP, and one final point on that, and then I'll close. You mentioned communication, and I just want to say, if you have limited budgets, spend it on communications. Because if citizens don't know about the opportunities that your companies have, what a small, medium-sized enterprise is now doing in context of growth, how markets are developing, and the jobs that are coming with that. If you don't tell those stories as a credible actor in your country, it might and likely won't be told. We know that those stories are hard to get often in national media, but stay at it. Be modern, engage young people. So I think that's quite important. Finally, here at COP29, we need a strong set of decisions here. We need a very strong outcome that accelerates the implementation of the 3 goals that you mentioned, Maria, that are being kind of ticked off. Well, what does this process need to deliver on that? We need a decision, not just initiatives, but a decision that lays out, okay, what does this mean? The EU has said this means a phase out globally of unabated coal in line with 1.5 and no new coal on the books. It means getting real about grids and storage. It means a tracking process inside of this process. It's great the IEA and IRENA are doing this. Let's bring this inside. And on finance, of course, we need and are working actively towards a modern and new approach to climate finance, one where, of course, public finance stays at the core. But we know that especially where there's good business, that's not where public money should be going. So let's work together to leverage your finance, hear from you what you need, so that we can make sure that much greater funds are flowing to developing countries. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. So before you go, because we know that you're very busy, but the business community needs certitude and policy coherence. And I think you have captured very well what we need. I think we don't have the privilege of having many of you come to us and speak in the way that you're doing. And I think this is for one reason. First, because it makes economic sense, strategic sense for you to be here. Because you were talking about Germany and how Germany is going to do these dialogues. Because you want to attract investments to a stable environment that you're going to create, right? And so the same we're hearing from the UK. And so the same we're hearing from other geographies. Okay, so here's the game in town is actually that those countries that manage to speak with business about their plans and work with them to develop the policies that are needed for business to invest are the ones that are going to attract more finance. And this is the game in town. And that's why we call it make your NDC investable, okay? Because that's what will attract that investment from companies that want to decarbonize. And you said the technologies are competitive in many cases. So let's focus on where those technologies are not competitive, and let's give the clarity and some incentive for a few years until those technologies are competitive, and then we move on to the next wave of technologies. So it's really important for business that you create the frameworks, the grid, the enabling grid that is needed. And I have heard you talking about how you're doing this in Germany, and we need, I hear this all the time from business. I can invest in my own, renewables, storage, etc. But we need the grid, we need the permitting, we need to be able to channel that energy to the grid. So thank you so much. Bring more of your peers to these debates. I know that we're working on it, because business, they're going to do a lot, but often there are barriers that only policymakers can remove, because the system is wired for fossil fuels, not for the clean technologies. So thank you. You go whenever you, and then we're going to move to Brazil. Super exciting to have you with us, Bruna. I know that you are presenting your NDC elsewhere, and so we have the privilege from hearing from you. We're very keen to go to Brazil and to see many things, but we know that from now until Brazil, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so that's why we want to hear from you. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you. Please introduce yourself as well in the role that you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It is really nice to be with all of you today. And really, Anna is not here because she's making my job very easy to be speaking, because we've made basically two big launches today. One is that as we are here now, our Vice President, Anna, Minister Marina Silva, our Minister of Climate and Environment, are hand-delivering our NDC to Simon Steele at the convention. But earlier today, we have also talked about investment, the Brazil investment platform, the Brazil country platform that is making our NDC investable. So making my job easier. I'm Bruna Cerqueira. I'm very newly come to Ana Toni's team. We've created this small COP30 advisory. So starting very much to think about what we need to do, what is our task ahead. And really good to be at this COP also to get some of that brain juice going and help us with ideas and thoughts of what we can make towards COP30. So very keen to engage and to hear from all of you on that. On our NDC, what is in that? I think that was the big headline of our NDC is that it's a target of 59 to 67% based on our baseline is the 2005, looking to 2035. So it is a big ambition for us absolutely the aim is to go to 67%. But the logic of doing it in a band and the logic of presenting it in that way is exactly to say we as government do not have all of the tools. We need the engagement of the economy. We need to look into the reality, the global economic reality that we don't have control over. But also we need to make the case to go and to build the economic reality that we need in order to be able to achieve that ambition. That is something that is absolutely not about saying we're not, I'm washing my hands clean of that. It's the opposite. We're going to work towards that, and please come along with us to be able to do it. Our NDC is based on a national climate plan, our Plano Clima climate plan, which looks both at mitigation and adaptation. So the international commitment is very much science-based. We've worked with the best model available for the Global South. And this is something that might not often be heard because, there's so many models here for the Global North. But for the Global South, there's one, BLUES, which is the one that we're using, which is helping us make the best science alignment that we can to 1.5. We're doing that because we want to set the example. As we're hosting COP30, we have the big task that hopefully is shared by all of us. We need to get the new NDCs on the table to be ambitious. But not only ambitious, because we're not aligned in terms of ambition to 1.5, but we're also not aligned in terms of implementation. We're also lagging behind on implementation on the current NDCs. So we need to give the example on both fronts, setting out the ambition, but also looking into what is needed to make that implementation available. And that is what our climate plan is about. We are very much, so I was looking into the model that you presented with your study, and I was hoping and trying to check all of the boxes there for us. So definitely the planning side, we've got it. When we're talking about sector targets, our NDC is economy-wide, all gases, as it should be. But we are, in our national climate plan, developing sectoral plans, 7 sectoral plans for mitigation, 16 sectoral plans for adaptation. This is about going to the specifics of what we need to do. The NDC itself is going to be economy-wide, but in the plans, as we're going into sector by sector. Where we are now with that, we have been working through the climate plan throughout the year. We've done a lot of public engagement, participatory process. That has been a big part of it. We've had over 22,000 suggestions from the Brazilian society all around businesses, etc. And that is the basis to build it. But we're also going to put to public consultation our mitigation strategy, adaptation strategy, and all of the sectoral plans. So that is the idea, to build it in a very participatory way, in a way that really engages and enables it to be a countrywide plan and not a federal government plan. Alongside with that, so I think that gives us a sense of our NDC. Alongside that, we're doing a lot in terms of economic instruments. We know that we cannot deliver all of this with the public budget, definitely. We know that there's a bit of international support, but that's absolutely not enough. We need to get the private finance flowing. That is less easy for an emerging economy than it is for an European country, for example. So we need to look into what are the tools, and very much our finance ministry is a big partner. This effort is a government-wide sector effort. We're working with an interministerial committee that has 23 ministries involved in the Brazilian government, but the finance ministry is a key partner to us. And what they are doing is, in parallel to our climate plan, they're doing our ecological transformation plan, as we're calling it, which is giving it the economic incentive side. We have done, for example, 2 issuances of sustainable bonds for Brazil. They have created this Eco Invest platform, which is about de-risking investment into our economies. And what now the next step is the launch of this Brazil investment platform for climate and ecological transformation. We have done that as a part of the discussions of G20, which Brazil has hosted this year. That has been very important for us to set the idea of bringing climate ministers with finance ministers, with central bank presidents, as well as international relations ministries, to be able to show that that is a force that needs to come together. You cannot only be talking about climate in the climate silo, in the environment silo. And part of that message of our G20 Task Force Klima, as we have called, is that we need to continue that work, and we can create country platforms to make our NDC investable. Our country platform is starting with 3 sectors. So we have a climate plan and ecological transformation plan as premises of that, but we're looking specifically into nature-based solutions, the energy transition, and the industrial transition. In each of those sectors, we have identified initial projects from the private sector that need investment, international investment, and we have put that to market. So now the response is up to you. Businesses, please do see what's in the platform, engage, and we really hope that this will show our private sector that there are opportunities, that the NDC, that our climate plans, they are about development for our country. They are about setting out not only that we are a climate leader, but that we are a leader in the new economy. That is very much the narrative. We now need to make that narrative true, which is a big task. And that's what we're up against, really much hoping that we can really have the engagement of the private sector to make that true. So please come along.
Thank you so much. And now I think you're going to have the opportunity to hear from leading companies and hear what they need as well. So can I invite to the stage Fiona Dugan, Global Sustainability Manager at Unilever, Miguel Muñoz, Global Head of Climate Policies from Iberdrola, Kerry Constable, Director of Decarbonization of Amazon, and José Luis Blasco, Global Sustainability Director at Amazon, and Robert Ticcio, CEO of Fortescue. Do we have enough chairs? Yes, please. Very good. So I'm going to start with my friends Roberto. Well, Roberto, you're not friends yet, but Miguel is a friend. Roberto and Miguel. So, yeah, what would you... Well, no, actually, I'm going to start with Roberto and then go through the panel to talk about what does your company expect or are looking in the next round of NDC. So let me start with you, Robert.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting us and for what I thought were 2 very informative setups around NDC conversations from both Brazil and Germany. I think remarks that were made over the course of the two opening statements that I would underscore, if there was a word that keeps on coming out with certainty, it is the word certainty. And so what we are looking for are very specific restrictions in the geographies in which we're going to be active. We have Fortescue is a $50 billion public company that's headquartered in Perth, Australia. It is the world's fourth largest iron ore miner. And we have built a portfolio of some $30 billion of unweighted project pipeline in green energy projects across the globe that span from hydrogen, as well as green electrons, wind, solar, hydro transmissions, large-scale batteries. What we are looking for robust plans with specifics in NDCs that allow us to be able to target large-scale investments. We're asking for those plans to be clear and for them to be able to move with speed. I think one of the challenges that we have found with a number of the plans is that they tend in the past to have been ambitious, but not come with the necessary specificity that will encourage and engender large-scale investment. And so we want specificity with the plans as well as ambition. Ambition is not enough. We need specificity, certainty. And then last point, I would say, as an American, I'm saying this, given the events that we've had over the last couple of weeks, we need to be able to do long-range planning. And that may sound like a throwaway comment, but it is extraordinarily important when we're trying, at least in our organization, to make 5 and 10 year large-scale multi-billion-dollar investment decisions. We need to know that the programs that are underpinning the support for the economics and our private market risk-adjusted returns are not subject to revoking.
Yeah, in some ways, when governments change and they look at changing certain policies, they need to understand what is the risk that this is going to have in attracting investments, because it doesn't provide a good image for a country to be changing every 4 years, right? Okay, let's thank you. Let's move to Jose Luis.
Thank you, Maria. I think that you have made a lot of work in this field. I only try to complement your analysis. I think that we are very aligned with this. As you know, Acciona has decided 20 years ago to become a new company and a new sector. We abandoned all our fossil fuel activities, don't work in any fossil fuel activity, and all the activities around the Acciona Group is targeting the opportunities of decarbonization, from motorcycles to renewables energy that we have 13 gigawatts or desalination. Let me give you a couple of insights about how we can make these NDCs more investable. The first thing is that probably we need to redefine what is ambition, because we are very focused on what is the percentage that at the end of the day we will reduce in a country. But we need to take into account that after 10 years of NDCs, we are growing our emissions. Something is wrong, and we are so much procrastination here, and we need to tackle the curving as soon as possible the peak of the emissions. And we need to focus on ambition to keep to curve the emissions as soon as possible in order to give the climate dialogue credibility. And now I think this is a question. And the second is about probably we need to change the name of the national determined contribution. We need to have national transition plans, because it's the same with other companies. We have TCFD, for example, and we have a transition plan. And this is completely different. It's different to have a target for the country and for the sectors that have a pathway. Because if you have a pathway in the different critical sectors, you have, first of all, visibility about investment. And when you have visibility, the accountants can take into account that the asset that you have more or less value. You have the de-risk, the new technology, and then you are focusing on the specific solution that you need to develop in terms of R&D. And I think that the example of Brazil or Germany or France or Japan, they have these pathways give us to the private sector very, very visible pathways about where will be the solution and where to invest. Thank you.
Thank you. So at the end, it is clear that it is the NDC, but what is more important is the detailed plan, the pathway, and some KPIs that we're going to track, right? That's how business operates. And when you're not meeting your KPI, then you think, okay, why am I not meeting? But it's also good to know that you're not meeting it ahead of time so that you can put in place the measures that can change that trajectory. This is normal in business. It should be also, normal also, I suppose, in the countries NDCs. But let's face it, the first one was NDC 1.0. Now I think we have learned, and we expect from countries to be much more sophisticated in the way that they present the headlines, but also the plan that goes with it. So now I'm going to move to Kerry, and then I will do Unilever, because I think it's two companies that have a geographical footprint that is incredibly vast, and two countries that are leading the way in a very impressive way. So, Kerry, what do you want to see in the many NDCs that will be interesting for Amazon?
Thank you, Maria, and it's wonderful to be here. I think Jennifer said it quite well, that NDCs are fundamentally about transforming the economy. They're the glide paths for businesses. They're the glide paths for countries to decarbonize. And I think as Amazon, as Maria mentioned, and as we all know, that Amazon is a highly global company. It is involved in several countries and in almost every hard-to-abate sector in the world. And what we would really like to see is a couple of KPIs, I would say, is we have been quite engaged in the tripling renewables campaign. So we have been working with Global Renewables Alliance. We worked last year on the Dubai outcome to include tripling renewables by 2030. And so we have been encouraging that NDCs in the next year in the revamped process include concrete renewable energy scale-up targets so that we can reach that tripling by 2030 goal. So that's one concrete KPI. In addition, really addressing the hard-to-abate sectors. They are hard. And Amazon, we are almost a cut of the real economy when it comes to our exposure to the last mile vehicles, the middle mile freight and cargo, global mile when it comes to maritime and aviation. It is hard. It is as much as we as a company can work with countries as they enhance their NDCs and address those hard-to-abate sectors, we want to collaborate. So I think really seeing NDCs and NDC processes, like our colleague from Brazil was talking about, the processes of collaboration and engagement with business, I think over the next year and over the next few months, of course, before March, is going to be really important. And I think as much as we can, we want to contribute.
Thank you. Definitely, it's been very impressive how much you have done on renewables. I think you're the largest in the world in a very short time period. Like everything you do in Amazon is like really fast. But the reality is that you have so many buildings around the world as well, and there is when it's hard, right? Because buying renewables now, it's easy. Yeah, it is that part where I find it's quite interesting as well, the work that you're doing. So let me go to Fiona, because also you have done a really interesting work on NDCs. And so, yeah, you're not only talking about it, but you have done a huge research about what is needed.
That's true, yes. So the question was, what does a good and effective NDC look like for Unilever? And that's something we were asking ourselves at the start of the year. So we said, okay, let's see what it looks like. So we commissioned a report by Patricia Espinosa to work out what that was. And, we're a very global company. We have a presence in 190 countries. 3.4 billion people a day use our products. So we cover a lot of places and a lot of supply chains. So we have a couple of umbrella asks. And then again, when you get down into the country-specific plans, we've got very clear plans for Brazil, for India, for Indonesia, etc., because these are some important places for us. So what are our umbrella asks? Well, 1.5 aligned is very important to us. It needs to have very significant emission reductions to keep us on track to 1.5. That means phasing out fossil fuels, phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, but of course, very, very importantly, tripling renewable energy and doubling renewable efficiency as well, of course. Now, there's some other areas as well that we're looking at. So we're looking at regen ag. So what are the measures and targets that we can use to scale up regen agriculture? We're also looking at forests. How can you protect and restore forests and make sure that the commodities are certifiable and from verified sources so that they drive fair market conditions. And then another one for us is chemicals. We make a lot of detergents, a lot of home care products, a lot of kitchen products, and we want to make sure that the ingredients going into our detergents are from fossil-free chemicals. So currently, that's a very hard area to be in because it's not always very cost effective. So how can we do that? Now, you know, a while ago, solar and wind wasn't cost effective and everyone was kind of dragging their feet on it. And now look where we are, you know, as I said, it's unstoppable. I mean, in India, we put solar panels on 6 of our factories. And as a result, we are saving 5 million over 15 years. Now, if you think of that in every single factory for Unilever, that's amazing. And that's a really good investment as well for us. We can say, we can go to our government and say, look, we want to do this. It's good for us. It's good for you. How can we work on it? So so Bruna, what you're saying about the dialogues, I think that's really, really important. It was great to hear. It's really nice to see that you're actually taking notes from what we're saying, because what you were saying, I was also taking notes. I was on my phone, but I was taking notes, don't you worry, that's what I was doing. So I think this type of dialogue is really, really, really important. And it's a great opportunity at these COPs to do this. So again, I would just say a little bit of a plug. We have a report on our website. It says very clearly what we want of the NDCs, and we're very, but we know as well the NDCs are a starting point. You know, the hard work kind of starts now, really. So we are very happy to be involved in that. Thank you.
What I find, thank you, Fiona. What I find, maybe that it is changing. I'm starting to see this trend, but let's see if it evolves. Is that both countries and companies are trying to reduce their emissions because they have targets, science-based targets, national plans, and it's difficult, okay? And so I think we have come to a level of humility in this space to say we need to work together, because I'm finding difficulties that I can only walk them through if I work with the ecosystem or if I work with the governments. And I find that that's why I find, we are kind of maturing in the process in this NDC 2.0. So let's go to my friend Miguel. Miguel, what do you want to see on the NDCs?
Thank you, Maria, for inviting me. Last but not least, of course, no, I'm fully aligned with what just has been said, and of course with the initial remarks from Brazil, Germany. My bucket list, the first element, I think it's important to keep talking about ambition. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we saw that the UNEP gap report was presented. We need a 57% emission reduction globally by 2035 if we want to meet 1.5 scenario. If we want to keep 1.5 scenario alive, this reduction. So first, NDCs should be aligned with this goal. For me, this is the first element in my bucket list. Following this, as a utility company focused on renewables, on electricity, we see some challenges that are very, very important. Now, we are not moving forward enough in electrification of economy. We want to enter in the era of electrification, as Fatih Birol said, but in some jurisdictions we are seeing that it is not moving forward. And fossil fuels remain very important in the energy mix. Which are the barriers to this electrification? Barriers that could be tackled in the NDCs, at least providing some guidelines. Taxation aligned with polluter pays, some plans to accelerate investments in energy infrastructure. We need networks, we need smart grids. If we want to provide electricity, clean electricity to our customers, clean solutions to electrify transport, to electrify heating and cooling, of course, in a renewable-based way, we need this infrastructure. We need to raise billions of dollars, euros in investments. And these NDCs will be crucial to provide these guidelines. That's the reason why we need to make not only an NDC, but also a plan that delivers in every aspect of economy to move forward. And last but not least, I think these NDCs should be also the base for a more deeper public-private conversation. because the private sector should be open, of course, to keep this continuous conversation to see which are the enabling conditions, and also the public sector, of course. The NDCs is the occasion to dynamize this public-private conversation, because at the end of the day, the challenge is of all of us.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting your point about electrification, and the fact that there's one initiative by this COP is this pledge on storage and investments in grids. There is an enormous technological development in the storage technologies. Costs are reducing massively, but also the capacity and the density and all these things that are really important, and that will allow us to even electrify more uses. But yes, as we say, some of the policies and the regulations at all levels, at national, local level, are made to favor the use of fossil fuels in some of those uses. I live in Geneva, and there I learned an interesting. I learned it by coincidence, so the communication is not that great, that if I want to change my heating, from now on, it can only be heat pumps, okay? Which is great. I didn't know. It would have been great that I knew. And I am kind of like sensitive to this kind of information. So if I don't know, I wonder, who knows? But anyway, I think, whoever wants to change it, then they will know. And they will have to pay a lot, unfortunately, because that's the other thing, that sometimes the price of these technologies for consumers are a bit too high. Anyway, let's come back. So I would like this to be an interactive dialogue, so I welcome you to raise your hand if you want to add any comment along the way. I'm going to move back to the panel, some questions about concrete policies that they think need to be included in these NDCs. We have heard some, but maybe we can go deeper. Please raise your hand, and then I will bring you in, okay? Because that way you are active. Sometimes I also call on the public to say things, but luckily today, because I don't know the names of many of you, I won't do it. But please don't be shy. I want to hear also from you. Okay, so let's move about what are the policies, concrete policy examples. Examples of policies that have worked and you think that could be implemented elsewhere, okay? Because it is true that governments are quite innovative and they try things, it works, and then you wish, okay, I wish they did this in other geographies. So anyone wants to start, or if I pick up from someone here? I know that Jose Luis wants to start. So Jose Luis.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Maria. I think that in terms of policies, the next 4 years, I think that the most important policy will be leadership, because we will have very, very tough 4 years ahead. And when you let me what is leadership? And if you take the word, let me play with that. The L stand for the long-term policies, the coherence of the policies in the long term is very crucial to be consistent. The E about the enablers. And we are talking about the enablers, we're talking about the permitting, we're talking about the grids, we are talking about electrification, but a lot of the context that we need to enable. And when you are going to the A, this is the addition, and the additional capital that enables in the past how we are enjoying with the renewables, because at that time when these rare machines were called alternative energy. Do you remember? That is alternative energy. Now is the mainstream because somebody was there supporting those. And I think that we need to also take into account that when we had the European Union with 300 million of stimulus, 400 million for the US, but in China they invest 847 million. I think that we need to have a point on China. And the final is the D. I think that we forget that all the decarbonization that we made was from the supply. But where is the demand? We need to encourage the demand. If we have not clients to consume the more molecules, probably we will fail. It's stupid sometimes to think that we need to triple the renewables if all the renewables goes to the same place.
You want to chip in? You're welcome.
Yeah,
Okay.
can I?
Yes,
Sorry,
please.
can I make one
Yes, yes.
just to build on that observation? So, our organization is a developer of electrons and molecules. Fortescue has a large pipeline of green hydrogen, which we've recently scaled back publicly, in large part because of the absence of firm offtake and the absence of defined buyers in more or less every geography. To answer your very specific question, though, about what has worked, there are certain geographies, and the EU being one of them, specifically around renewable hydrogen, not just setting out ambition, but having very specific targets, and those targets have consequences, economic consequences, for not being met for participants in the ecosystem that, for example, are consuming fossil fuel-based hydrogen. So we are very big fans of programs and derivatives of NDCs that have actually economic penalties to the extent that they are not met, because they can be very powerful incentives to create the type of offtake and demand that we see lacking. And that's just the reality. That's sort of the, economic put and take of the way that behavior gets changed. And so we like to see that. We want to see it. We think more geographies need to adopt it, but it needs to be rooted in ambition and needs to be aggressive.
I'm going to move to Miguel, but it's quite interesting. So this is the Women Business Coalition, okay? And we have 7 partners that you cannot see. And we had a retreat, and then you can see them there, okay? So we had a retreat a month ago, and then we were discussing about corporate climate action and what is the future of it. And one of the outcomes of that discussion with the head, these are very important and very thoughtful leaders, was that we need to move from voluntary to mandatory. And I keep hearing from many, we have green hydrogen, but no one wants to pay us. Yeah, I bet they don't, because it's super expensive, right? Who wants to pay if their competitors are not paying? So that's exactly the point that you're making, and I'm glad to hear. I'm sure that from the demand side, maybe we will hear differently. Do they want to pay? But at the end of the day, the more we scale that demand, the faster the price will go down. But it's also about the responsibility, from those producers to reduce the price, right? Because sometimes, in the example that I mentioned on heat pumps, then the end consumer has to pay a really high price, which is not the real cost of the technology. So there are some gains there. But anyway, let's go to Miguel.
Thank you, Maria. I think that maybe from the policy perspective, we can have a more holistic approach when we are dealing with NDCs. We, of course, can talk about energy infrastructure. This is my main narrative, as usual. And you need, of course, regulatory certainty. All the planning processes should be more anticipatory, not based in the past. We should give the local authorities, regional authorities in different jurisdictions, the resources needed sometimes to tackle this overwhelming number of projects that will have to be passed on renewables. We have to take care about taxation, about those finding questions. Yes, but at the same time, the second question is that we should have a focus also in our customers as companies, in industry. Especially in Europe, we are seeing that industry is struggling to not only to meet, in some cases, the goals, but also in terms of competitiveness, capacity to grow, to scale up some clean solutions. Now there is very interesting proposals from the Draghi report. We will have the Clean Industrial Deal in the coming months. We should connect these proposals that will be made in the Clean Industrial Deal, for example, with the new European NDC that should have a goal by 2040 of 90% emission reduction. So connect the dots. Industrial policy is not something different from climate policy. Policies to drive clean infrastructure, clean solutions are connected with climate also. In US, you have the IRA that was very important policy tool to meet climate targets. You have different examples. we should connect the dots. We should have an holistic approach when we are talking about policies, if we want to meet NDCs and at the same time to tackle the rest of challenges.
Yeah, at some point when we were doing this report, we talk at the end, the NDC is like the industrial plan of the country, because that's, and you want to make it investable, and we're seeing countries that are doing a roadshow to sell their plan as well, no? As we're seeing now. So I think it's really interesting comment. Thank you, Miguel. Yes, Fiona.
Kerry, I think you want to come in, so I'll hand it over to you afterwards. Yes, I think, we can talk about the examples and what worked. There's always kind of this worked, but I think the thing that was happening at the time of those examples was that there was people who were saying it's not going to work and they were trying to delay it or they're distracted with other solutions. So I think it's really, really important if we have solutions that do work, we explain it and we use them as examples, and progressive businesses come out really strongly, because we're talking here about what do businesses need from governments, and we're talking about what governments need from businesses, but I think it's definitely a two-way thing. So we have to give governments the confidence and the cover that they can go harder and faster. And the way to do that is to show the skin in the game. Say, we're going to invest here, actually. Unilever has 150 million decarbonisation plans. We have a 1 billion climate and nature fund. We're going to spend it on this, we want to spend more. And showing and giving people that backing is really, really important, especially at this time.
Yeah, thank you. I cannot, this is what we do at Women Business, and I have to say that Unilever has been an Iberdrola and most of the people in this panel with us for the past 10 years, and I think it's thanks to you that where we are in that sense. And as you hear, I think also governments want to hear that progressive voice. When I met Jennifer, we met in New York, and I say, well, I think there is a point where the government needs to see with whom they want to speak. With those that don't want to do anything, or with those that want to drive the agenda, right? So it's very clear with whom they need to speak. But anyway, sometimes you wonder, no? Because actually, if they are serious, they should be working with those that want to advance the agenda, right? It's very obvious, but anyway, it needs to be said. Kerry?
A lot of my colleagues have referred to this, but I think the public-private partnership and public really deepening co-designing between business and country is I think going to be key, and also intra-country. So I think something that Amazon is doing a lot more of and has done is collaborating with multiple countries and multiple companies on to tackle hard to abate sectors, to tackle nature investments. So LEAF is one example where the UK, US, Norway, Amazon came together to found really a avoided deforestation, a new way of doing avoided deforestation investments, and started with a $1 billion commitment. And those are the kinds of policies that would be really interesting to see in NDCs that aren't typical, right? But that are really intra-country, multiple countries getting together with companies to tackle and go deep on, in some of the sectors that really need some investments. Going back to some of the hard-to-abate sectors, I think Maria mentioned Amazon's buildings. We have over 5,000, and really the built environment. That is one of the hardest sectors to decarbonize. Retrofitting is extremely difficult. We all know, low emission, zero emission concrete and steel, not yet scalable. We all want it to be scalable and at price parity, et cetera. I think seeing policies that will help to bring the prices down, and working with businesses on buyers coalitions. And this is something that a lot of companies are starting to join, buyers coalitions on sustainable aviation fuel, low carbon construction materials, methanol, ammonia. Having those buyers coalitions collaborate with governments and will bring the prices down much more rapidly. And I think doing a lot more together and seeing a lot more collaborative, cross-company, cross-country, focused sectoral, as you were saying, sectoral investments to really tackle these hard-to-abate sectors. We're not going to be able to get there. We're not going to, we'll see the same emissions gap report next year unless we see more of that. And I think it's really a time when we almost have to say it's an emergency and we need to see more of that.
Yeah. So I think here there are two approaches: is whether it's voluntary, the buyers club, and there are great buyers clubs out there, or whether it's mandatory. So I'm going to ask the panelists, this is, you're not committing yourself, you're not committing your company to this, but which one do you think would be the approach that could work realistically better when it comes to, and Carrie, I consider that you have already spoken. So, yeah, I don't know, Miguel, I mean, you're selling, but anyway, you can talk, you're selling electricity more than buying, but also you have buildings, etc. So how would you see they mandate you that you buy zero emission steel and zero emission, a percentage of your buildings? Would you you think that's a good measure? I mean, if it's going to affect everybody or not?
You made a PhD on energy efficiency, I remember, no? So you have a lot of... No, of course, I think that when you are talking about buildings, 40% are about final energy consumption, you should keep an eye on energy efficiency standards, of course, when the building, the construction, but at the same time, for us, and you cannot keep the current path of natural gas penetration in buildings. You have ready very important solutions. You have heat pumps that can be competitive. You have some different solutions in construction in areas, but also in electrification, that is my side, to install renewables, to incorporate all this. So the policies, not only in the construction sector, but also when you are thinking about subsidies, when you are thinking on administrative issues, especially in Spain, we have buildings with different land laws, so you have to think about this kind of laws, administrative bureaucracy, a lot of laws, a lot of regulations to align with the decarbonization of buildings, to install renewables, more efficient standards, more efficient systems for heating and cooling in different aspects. The new directive on energy efficiency, for example, has introduced very interesting standard, very interesting frameworks, white certificates, etc. There are a lot of stuff already taking place, at least in Europe. That is the part that I know more, but much more to do to align. Yeah.
So I think Acciona, sorry to put it, you have eggs in both baskets, no? Both the energy and the construction. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it is different when you are building. Now the technology allow you to, once the infrastructure is built, it's perfectly technical feasible to become energy positive. It is really feasible because you have a lot of alternatives in order to make it. We have, for example, our campus in Madrid is energy positive. We produce more energy than we are consuming in our. But I think that you are right. The problem, the real challenge is when you are building an infrastructure, you have a lot of this in built environment that this is still these hard to abate sectors that you mentioned. And this is now, there are no solution, technical solution, feasible solution. But I give you a secret. We were working with our suppliers because we have a tragedy, the tragedy of the green option. And I give you what was our experience. We were observing our procurement department during 3 years, okay? And what we realized, the first is that when you have in the procurement process, you are squeezing your supply with the gray option. And when you have all the final round, you ask for the green alternative. This is stupid. It's always more expensive. But now we are making 5 years commitment with our suppliers, and we have parity in pricing. I can give you an example. HBO, that this is one of our problems in our heavy machinery when you are building something. The problem is that you have not heavy machines in electric. Still, is working only for around 20 tons. But in order to make it short, we have discovered HBO, and now we are buying 25 million liters in Spain, for example, in Australia, in Chile, in Canada. All this is giving you the opportunity to build your data centers less carbon intense. But is this still a challenge?
Yeah. I'm going to, Fiona, if you don't mind, I mean, not maybe on the buildings, but you mentioned the chemical sector, which is also how to abate. And then also, let's also be a bit pragmatic, okay? It's not about going from 0 to 100% clean. So you can start to introduce sections and grow those, which I suppose that's maybe what you're doing with chemicals, no? But anyway, tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, many people don't even understand the issue of chemicals, actually, when you talk about fossil fuel feedstocks. They say, well, what is that? So first of all, you have to make people aware of the issue. Second of all, you have to make people aware of how it impacts the business, how it impacts industry. And then you also have to make people aware of the knock-on effects as well as it. So in kind of answer to your tricky question, do I believe it should be mandatory or not? I'm going to kind of pass the buck a little bit and say I'm a little bit agnostic, really, because there's a collection of different mechanisms you can use to scale up fossil-free chemicals. But we definitely need a mixture of the carrots and sticks, and sometimes the stick might need to be a little bit harder than the fruit of the carrot. So I'm kind of having to say that you have to look at it from a case-by-case basis. You have to make sure that whatever legislation does come in, it comes in at a way that you can transition. You can make sure your suppliers are on board. It takes a lot of time to build up new capacity and new manufacturing, but we do need to move fast. And the key thing really for us is price parity. So it may be that we do need some mandatory legislation that comes in, but again, it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. And you'd have to look at the whole ecosystem. You have to make sure the knock-on effects and the unintended consequences are all mapped out. So a little bit of a pass the buck here when I say I'm agnostic about it, but whatever works, works. And look back to the past examples, what moved fast. And if you do need it, then you need it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I always use this example when we moved to LED lighting, no? Which was much more expensive, but then now who thinks about that, no? So I think there are in some cases, yeah, that's possible, but others, if the technology is still not there or the scale, etc., yeah, you might introduce some bottlenecks. Good. Okay, I was going to go. Fantastic. Okay, so can I give you, the mic? Could you come more here, and you as well, so that I can give you the mic?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello, I'm Marcio Viegas, the founder at Sustain, a friend of a couple of people here as well. Well, first of all, congratulations, parabéns pelo plano do Brasil. I'm Brazilian as well, but I'm based in Spain with those two guys, for instance. So my question is, if we want the NDCs to be business plans or industrial plans, but for a country like Brazil, it's not really industrial, it's more like a national plan, business plan. What KPIs, what metrics would you like to see in those plans to make them investable? Because I was scanning your plan. It's 44 pages, and they follow the templates from us. They have to, but it's hard to get where can you invest. I don't know if you had the chance to look at their plan, their NDC, and that's first question. What KPIs? The second, and we have Blasco here, who is an expert on taxonomies. How do you see taxonomies being used to get those KPIs to make them investable? Thank you.
Let me get the other question so that then we can respond to the three of them. So please come here.
Hello. I'm Phil Bloomer from Business and Human Rights Resource Center. I'm Phil Bloomer from the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. Thank you. I suppose just partly an answer to your question about voluntary or regulatory, I would argue that we know that climate is the greatest market failure, and in those conditions we desperately need governments to come in to set a level playing field regarding the scale of carbon emissions that are allowed, etc., and that would point hotly to the issues of changing the regulatory standards to ensure that there is the level playing field for the better companies that are doing more, but also a change in the in the incentives that are necessary. And now I suppose my question is really around those areas of the new incentives that are going to come in. What does the panel see as the key incentives that are going to be necessary for this? Do they believe that the process of the Inflation Reduction Act, for instance, in the United States has helped in that way, and particularly the relationship of that subsidy with the minimum standards that were expected in terms of, for instance, the freedom of association, right to collective bargaining, and those areas of workers' rights and community rights?
Thank you. I'll give you the mic. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so we have 3 questions. I know the taxonomy is going to go to José Luis, no? He's the expert. Who wants to take the one on metrics? Okay,
I can say at least one metric that for me would be very interesting to see in a plan or government plan would be the reduction of fossil fuels in the energy matrix, if you see how it would evolve. And of course, some kind of, and in the UK there is a good example, some kind of carbon budgets in different sectors. You could see in this way, in some climate laws, we are advocating a lot about these carbon budgets because you see how the sectors are evolving to meet the net zero. But the fossil fuel campaign is there, and we think that if we continue putting a lot of policies in the plan, but the fossil fuels remain at the top of the energy matrix, we won't do anything. So for me, one of the key indicators. On the other question on support schemes and subsidies, of course they are needed, but we should at first stage to keep markets in some way working, avoid distortions in market, to internalize in some way well the environment externalities. And when we are talking about this, after this we can see which specific sectors, technologies at an earlier stage, and they would need some support to scale up, but support that do not introduce distortions and not break markets, especially when we are talking about Europe.
And carbon pricing, right?
Of course, always.
Okay, Fiona.
I was thinking about KPIs, and I was saying robust carbon pricing would certainly be one that we'd be looking for. But also I think you make a very good point about the elements of what a good NDC looks like, or the elements of what a good policy shift could look like. It has to include elements of the just transition, because you don't want to win the war on emissions but lose the war on inequality. This is an opportunity to do something different, and we can do something different. So I think having conditions like that attached, I think is very, very helpful. It fuels something new and different and hopefully more progressive. I think you made a very good point as well about regulation. Sometimes you absolutely certainly need regulation. I was just being very careful. I didn't want to say it has to be mandatory or it doesn't have to be mandatory. But absolutely, in certain cases you do, because you need that to really push things on, raise the level playing field, again, get economic parity. So I just wanted to raise those points in connection to your question.
Thank you. Kerry, you want to comment?
In terms of metrics, I mean, I think what we really need, we need simplicity, clarity, and carrots. And I think there's been, and I would say in the voluntary and the regulatory spaces, I think corporates, I think we all are feeling a bit of drowning in accounting these days. There are a lot of different requirements, there are a lot of different taxonomies, and it's good. It means that it's good in some ways. It means that there is more demand for, and there needs to be more demand because the world needs it. At the same time, there are some unintended consequences, which is that the budgets for R&D and innovate, engineers to innovate, to really decarbonize those hard to abate sectors, it's becoming there's a lot of investment in reporting experts and accountants, and we need a balance. And so I would say that whether it's voluntary or compliant, and I think it's government dependent, and I think what's really important is that what's asked of companies is clear, it's simple, and that there's some interoperability between what's asked, so that companies can do what companies should do, which is innovate and invest in decarbonization rather than invest in reporting. And not, you need some investment in reporting, but it shouldn't dominate. And so I think that I think that's I would say sort of that's more of a process of what metrics should be. I would say in terms of concrete metrics, I mean, I think tripling renewables, like anything that makes processes faster. So, any new markets, new mechanisms that will enable, I mean, Amazon's the largest corporate procurer of energy, clean energy in the world. Anything that governments can do to create markets and mechanisms to help us to buy more clean energy, we welcome. So whatever those KPIs, they may look different in different countries, but that those, I think simple markets will unlock more investment. Companies want to invest. We just need simplicity, clarity, and some tools for scalability.
Thank you, Jose Luis.
Thank you, Marcio. I think that the taxonomy alone doesn't work. We need to have a compact. My favorite KPI is, let me say, is what happens if you don't comply. Because if the main problem that we have is the credibility of these Disneyland NDCs, that if you have not a real something that to make it enforce, probably it is not investable. And I think the taxonomy is one of the key elements in order to make it credible if you have the mechanism in order to put this in the same, but if you have this, you need to define what is green and what is not. And the taxonomy is this classification. I like also how this is only confirmed. I see a confirmation about the carbon pricing around the carbon markets. I think that in the absence of the global carbon pricing, I am very confident that in sometime, a global carbon market give us the opportunity to have a CBAM for external imports that give us the opportunity to have a signal of pricing. And with this, we will have we will need the taxonomy in order to define what is in and what is out. And I think that this is different mechanism in order to confirm the most important KPI for an investor is what happens if you don't comply.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just be super quick. I mean, examples of KPIs that we like are, the very specific renewable or green hydrogen targets that exist under the RED III legislation, for example, in Europe. We want specific targets where there are penalties. This comes back, sorry to bring it back again to mandatory, but comes back to where there are penalties and costs associated with not meeting those targets, rather than just being aspirations, are important to us. To answer the gentleman's question, as well as sort of one of the I think two Americans sitting up here, I think the IRA was incredibly effective legislation on one hand because it provides generous economic incentives for capital formation. Where it has faltered is in the opening remark I at least made, which is around certainty. We are still waiting for clarity from Treasury in the United States, specifically around the molecule market and 45V, as it relates to taxonomy for defining green, whether it be in some very specific lanes of classification. And that has significantly retarded the potential explosion of capital formation in the molecule market that is instructive about how to potentially move faster in future regimes.
Thank you. I have to say that I'm very impressed with you, Rona, because you stayed the full panel, you took notes, and now you're going to ask questions, which I just love because this is what dialogue is about. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I wanted to share, a quick comment. So you asked about mandatory or incentive side, and I will say that one of the difficult discussions that we're having in country is that we're being asked by business, especially in the agriculture sector, but also in the energy sector, what's in it for me? Why are you raising your ambition? You're removing my space to sell carbon credits, and that's a very tough discussion, honestly, about companies that have invested in reforesting, companies that are investing in that, and they're saying, if you put your targets too high, I'm not going to be able to sell on 6.4, 6.2. So it is I mean, the discussion on incentives, at least for us, is a really big one. Where do we come on that? So my question to you is, as we move towards COP30 next year, one of the things in the agenda, and this is the conversation business on the international side, business and countries, is going to be the new mandate for the action agenda. And I've been taking part in some of those discussions. What would you like to see in that new mandate that would improve that relationship between business and countries in practice and actually get those incentives rolling?
I think Carrie is behind some of this in her previous capacity, so please.
I love the action agenda. Yes, I was part of the Paris Agreement team that created the action agenda, honored in the Lima Paris Action Agenda back in the day, it was called. So I think I have so many thoughts here, but I won't bore everyone. You know, at the beginning of the action agenda, there was so much enthusiasm. It was really a big tent approach. It was the UN coming together with governments, coming together with companies in the same room, sector by sector. So it was still sector by, you know, and I think, you know, as you were saying, we still need sector by sector. I think what's happened is there's been a bit more bifurcation. I think companies have felt more stick than carrot. I think there's been a big focus on reporting, et cetera. And the co-designing that really was the origin of that, it was just lit up the room in 2014 and 2015. It really did, because it was the first time that businesses and cities were coming to the UN and, you know, they're seat at the table, but new deals, new contracts, it was a lot. There was a lot of, and I think there hasn't been that kind of collaboration to that extent. And so what I would love to see, and this is, you know, taking my Amazon hat off, but I'm sure my colleagues at Amazon would agree, but would be a resurgence of that excitement and really a focus on concrete new deals, new contracts together, bringing, you know, and really carrots and less criticism, more collaboration, less isolation between silos. I think, and truly having a big tent approach again, I think is really needed, and I think the action agenda is probably the only process, you know, fostered by the UN and the presidency that can do that, and I think it needs a resurgence. Sort of go back to day one, go back to 2014. But I'm biased, but I do think we need it.
Well, I think we could continue to talk about this for hours, but I find that maybe the reception, the drinks, apparently there's vodka as well if you want, for the Americans in the room. Anyway, they're there. You know, it's been a pleasure. I mean, as you see, I mean, we work very closely with the companies that are on the panel and with the governments, and I'm very keen. Yeah, I've enjoyed a lot the conversation, obviously. I find that I want to leave this final thought that is linked to what Carrie was doing, because we collaborated in some work that she was doing for the high-level expert group. Is that, yeah, we need, you know, there is high ambition, and the countries and companies know how to get to a percentage of that ambition. As you say, you have the 67%. And there's the other element that they don't know. It could be very positive, like the renewable development, and then, wow, and then we kind of beat all our targets, or not. And I think we just need to be conscious of that and don't be too hard on that last 10%. I think what is important is that we get that 80% right, because that's where we start, right? And not have this absolutist view that either, you know, it's 100% or nothing, right? And I find that humility on coming together and co-creating, because we need each other, is also going to be very important going forward. So with this thought, please join us for the drinks, and thank you very much for your interventions.